There's not much to say about this dresser except that it's beautiful and I love it. So let's talk about something else. I posted a couple of silent videos. I mean, they were not completely silent. I was talking to you guys with the music and it took me a long time to find the right music for the right action in the video. And it probably took me longer to create those videos than just voice them over. Anyways, some of you said that you missed my voiceover, and thank you so much, you guys, for that. You're awesome. But I still think that my English is a bit rough. I make lots of mistakes. And let's face this elephant in the room, I have an accent. I mean, I don't have terrible Russian accent, but I still have it like a lot. Well, maybe it's not because just the accent, but because my pronunciation in any language. You can ask my mom and she'll confirm that my pronunciation sucks. She can't understand me sometimes, even in Russian. So all I want to say while I'm pouring that stripper to start taking off the finish from the dresser, if I'll say something that you don't understand or it doesn't make sense to you or I mispronounce something, you asked for that. I don't know why you like being tortured, it's none of my business. And with that being said, hi everybody, welcome to another makeover. I tried to scrape the old finish off, but it didn't work, that's why I took my stripper. This is my favorite chemical stripper, circa 1850, and this is gel formula. I just bought that big can of gel formula of the stripper, but before that I had been using liquid formula for a while. And the winner of Alona's favorite chemical stripper award is circa 1580 liquid formula.
First, I want to thank Alona for this incredible honor. I want to thank the company that created me for creating me. And thank you to all refinishers for always believing in me.
I mean, they both are great. I think it's just a personal preference. To me, it seems like liquid formula works faster and it's less messy. And no, unfortunately, this video is not sponsored by any company. I'm just sharing with you based on my experience opinion. I applied the first coat of the stripper and it didn't start working right away. That's why I left it for about 5 to 10 minutes. And still nothing was happening. Well, not completely nothing. It curdled, but it didn't do anything to the top coat. And because I just opened that can of the stripper, I thought maybe something was wrong with the stripper. Maybe it was, I don't know, spoiled, expired. So I took the jar from a different dresser with a different top coat and I applied the stripper and it worked right away. That was a relief because I bought a big can of the stripper. Meanwhile, the jar I was working on and I had set aside, it was still with the stripper on top. It was pretty much soaked into the surface, but I noticed that the top coat started bubbling. So the curdling situation didn't mean anything. The stripper was still working. All I needed was 5 or maybe 10 more minutes and the second coat, obviously. On the second jar, I decided to try using heat gun. I've been asked why I don't use a heat gun to remove the top coat, and those people, they were probably from Belarus or from Russia, because in Belarus, for example, we have mid-century modern furniture with a thick top coat. It's called polyether, but I found that here in Canada, there's not much of the furniture with a polyether. It's mostly lacquer or shellac or polyurethane, and the top coats are usually not thick, but with this one, I decided to try. And as I expected, it didn't really work. I mean, you can see it does something and I can peel off the top coat. It wasn't even peeling, it was like flaking mostly, and it took way too long. So I went back to my first jar, and with the second coat of the stripper I was able to remove a lot, but not everything. I needed a third coat obviously, and I wasn't really happy about it, telling you the truth, because this meant that it might take way longer to strip all 4 jars than I had expected. But I had no other options, so I applied a third coat of the stripper and I moved back to my second jar. And yes, the order is important for you to follow my story. I applied the stripper to the second jar, and this was the first coat of the stripper. And I noticed that some areas started bubbling right away. And those areas were where I applied some heat with a heat gun. I had no idea I did that, but obviously I did. And this way I unexpectedly discovered the best method of removing this type of finish. I'm still not too sure what kind of finish it is. My guess is an oil-based polyurethane. And yes, it is unusual for the area this dresser came from, but I'm absolutely sure it has been refinished at least once in the 80s probably. I set this jar aside, but I had to come back to the first jar, which was kinda annoying because I couldn't wait to try my new technique. But I didn't want the stripper to dry on me, so sometimes we gotta do what we gotta do. After the third coat of the stripper, there was still some finish left here and there, but I decided that I could get rid of it while sanding. Next, I took the third jar and I applied some heat to it, and then I applied a stripper, and it was the most satisfying process I've ever done because I could see those top coat bubbling as soon as I put my brush with the stripper on it. But my camera decided that it wasn't satisfying enough to film it. She's admitted her fault and she's apologizing to you. I threatened her with being replaced by the new one, so hopefully it won't happen again. So the only video I have is me taking off the finish from the fourth jar. And this is after applying some heat and the first coat of the stripper. And this is amazing. When I was done with stripping, I moved on to sanding, and first I did it by hand. I was afraid to sand through the veneer because it seemed pretty thin. I used 100 grit sandpaper, and while I was sanding, I realized that I'm leaving some marks. Not as swivel marks, obviously, but there were some horizontal marks, like tiny scratches. That's why I switched to my orbital sander, and I used the foam pot so it doesn't let me to apply a lot of pressure, and it worked. All four jars had this peeling veneer from inside. There was no glue left, absolutely no glue. I didn't even have to sand anything. I just applied some wood glue, I taped it, and I let it dry. Meanwhile, I flipped the dresser on its side, and I figured that the finish was pretty thin on the sides, so I didn't need to strip it off. I was good with sanding. And I even didn't have to go low on the grit. I started with 180 grit sandpaper, and it worked just fine. And here's what we got down here, peeling veneer situation on the both sides, on the inside and the outside. And on the outside, not just the walnut veneer was peeling, the subtract veneer was coming off also. Honestly, when we picked up this dresser, the situation wasn't that bad. Then I was moving it in my garage. I was trying to do my best, but every move the veneer was peeling a little bit more. It wasn't the end of the world. I just needed to squeeze some glue in there and clamp it and let it dry. I was more worried about this splitted wood, and it wasn't splitted the whole way through. It was just splitted at this very end. I checked it, I put some needle in there, and it didn't go that far. And I didn't really know how to deal with this. I still don't. I just left it as is. I was thinking to put some thin pieces of wood into those cracks, but I didn't because I thought it might cause even more splitting down the road. I still have this dresser, and I'm thinking about putting some epoxy in there and then to add some wooden planks to the edges. It will cover those cracks and it will create the barrier between the floor and the edges with the veneer. I think it's a good idea. But if you have a better idea, just let me know in the comments. It would be greatly appreciated. Once the veneer was all glued back, I started working on those chipped areas. I wanted to make patches, but to do that, it's better to cut the areas first and have straight lines. This way, it's easier to work with and there's less possibility to have a gap between patch and the veneer. There we go, great job, almost straight lines. I taped the areas and with the pencil I made the templates for the patches. Then I transferred them onto the piece of the veneer and then I made the patches. Unfortunately, I didn't have enough of walnut veneer on hand, so for this repair I used the veneer I had on hand from one of the previous makeovers, and this is the sub veneer. I had a lot of scratches and dents on this side, and while the veneer was gluing, I tried to steam them out. I sprayed the area with the scratches and then I put some damp cloths and I applied some heat with the hot iron. The surface has dried, the gluing patches has dried, and I sanded the surface again with 180 grit. I tried to do my best to fit the patches and they turned out pretty good, but still here and there I had some gaps in between original veneer and the patch. And just in case, to be on the safe side, I applied some wood filler not just to the gaps I could see, but all over the patch. Once the wood filler dried, I smoothed the area with 180 grit and then I repeated exactly the same steps on the other side. And those cracks, as you can see, they were way deeper here. And looking at them right now, I think that I had to do something, but back then my excuse was that those cracks, they didn't happen overnight. They probably happened like a while ago, and the dresser survived it. I didn't want to make it worse. I decided to make some repairs with the veneer and leave those cracks as is. I can't say that I'm proud with myself about it, but I'm not gonna lie. I've been doing furniture refinishing for 3 years, and I feel like I'm still learning. I learn with every project and I try to do my best, but sometimes I make bad decisions. The insides of the drawers needed my attention as well. I cleaned them first of all, and two of them had those type of cracks. I tried to sand them, but it didn't work. To fix those cracks, I used the sea glue. I squeezed some glue onto the scratches and I left it to sit for about 1 minute. So this way the glue would fill in the cracks, and then I sprayed it with an activator. And of course, I didn't leave it like that. I sanded it smooth. I sanded the front part of the dresser, but I left the legs because I was hoping to remove them. I was only able to remove the screws that were holding the legs. I mean, they were not holding anything because the legs were sitting pretty tight. They were glued pretty good. I tried the heat gun, but I ended up sanding them without removing from the dresser. You see those dividers in between drawers? I don't know the real purpose of them, maybe to collect the dust over the year, and they were doing this job pretty good. Anyways, one of them was broken and I needed to remove it, and it turned out that it was a cardboard. I decided to take them off and not to replace them and keep this dresser dust free. Once I was done sanding the legs, I flipped the dresser back on them and I sanded the top. The top coat was thicker than on the sides, but it was pretty worn out, so I didn't need to strip it. I just used 180 grit sandpaper and that's it. Then I steamed out the scratches and I was able to get rid of almost all of them except for a couple that were really deep into the wood grain. Once the top was dried, I sanded it with 180 again. I was finally done with all prep work and it was time to blend in my patches. I poured a little bit of mineral spirit on the side and I wiped it off. It gave me an idea how this dresser would look after applying the finish. Working on my other projects, I noticed that if I use a lot of mineral spirit, if I pour it over the surface, this makes the color darker than the top coat would. And if I do repairs like this, I usually make them a little bit lighter, slightly lighter than the color of the veneer with the mineral spirit. For blending, I'm using gouache paint. I figured that you can use pretty much any type of paint as soon as it's flat. I tried acrylic paint, but once it's dry, it's a little bit on the satin side, and when I apply a top coat over it, it's even more glossy. Gouache dries flat, but it still has a little bit of sheen once I apply the oil over it, but so far it works better for me. Next, I stained wooden parts of the dresser. They were made out of different wood species. Some of them were ash, some of them were birch or maple. I was prepared to apply different types of stain to the different wood species, but first, as the base color, I applied salmon water-based wood stain in the color American Walnut, and it worked. It worked just fine. I didn't have to apply anything else. And I also stained the edges of the drawer fronts with the same color. As a top coat, I used Audi's Super Duper oil. And while I was applying it, I realized that the veneer was turning darker than I expected it. Even darker when it was with mineral spirit on it. And I was like, okay, it's a top. I didn't pour a lot of mineral spirit on the top because I didn't have to do any repair and color blending. But when I started working with the sides, same thing, it turned out darker. So my repairs were a little bit visible. Not like you can tell that there is repairs with the first glance of the dresser. Even with the second, you wouldn't tell. But if you know where the repairs are, you can see them. I applied the first coat to the dresser and to the drawer fronts, and then in 1 hour I came back and I buffed it off. The original back panel of the dresser had water damage, so I had to replace it. I have to be really careful saying that word, sheet of plywood. Hopefully it's right. No, it's not. It's a sheet of hardboard. And it finally was warm enough outside so I can make the cut outside. As you can see, it's already a mess in the garage. I didn't want to add more. But as soon as I started making those cuts, the hurricane-like wind came and then it started raining. Thankfully, it wasn't hailing. I was a little bit nervous and in rush, but I nailed it. The last step is to staple this thing to the back of the dresser and we are done here. Let me remind you how this dresser looked before. And here's how it turned out. And honestly, this is the makeover where I like the before color-wise better than the after. I didn't expect that the oil would change the color that much. It hasn't happened to me before, not like this. On the other hand, with a darker shade that burl wood grain is more pronounced, it makes it pop, and I know that darker furniture is becoming a trend and it will be a trend for next while, according to designers and the world furniture exhibitions. But for this dresser, I still like the lighter color. And here's the pictures of my repairs, and as you can see with the straight light pointing at it, you can see them. But if you change the angle and if it's just staying in your room, it's hardly noticeable. That's it for today. Let me know what you think and see you in my next makeover.